Welcome to the Business End of Agility podcast, hosted by New Zealand's Business Agility Meetup community. We're here to bring you real-world stories from innovative organisations and forward-thinking leaders around the globe. We're going to explore all facets of business agility, from adaptive leadership and evolving company cultures to emerging ways of working, processes and technologies. I'm your host for the session, Bianca, and thank you for joining us. All right. Okay, welcome to today's podcast. Does your organization lack community? We're going to be exploring the importance of community in organizations and why it's vital for creating resilience, what leaders need to be thinking about, and what each of us can do to start building community. And to help us do this, I'm absolutely thrilled to have the wonderful Beth Gervase as today's guest. Originally from the desert Southwest in the US, she now calls Auckland home and is the business agility lead at ANZ NZ and is leading their Better Business Agility program. Who wouldn't want one of those in their business? She is well known for her lighthearted and pragmatic approach to companies evolving from knowing organizations to learning organizations and encouraging experimentation and innovation at every level. So Beth, welcome to the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
We're going to kick straight in because I know you quite well, and I have to say you're probably one of the best community builders I know. So I'm pretty excited to be talking about the topic of community with you today. But firstly, let's define, what do you mean by community?
Look, community, it can be found everywhere if you look, but it's really about that connection or bond between community members. And look, I grew up in an Italian family. My grandparents lived up the street. All the cousins were around us. And, back in America, when I grew up in the 70s, we had something called on the porch culture, right? So everyone sat out front. We all knew our neighbors. We all, they helped raise us, right? All of my friends, families, they all had a hand in raising us. And that really, really was our community, right? Now at work, it's the same, right? We hope for a sense of community in our teams, in our disciplines, on our projects, and definitely within the organization. So it's really about that sense of, shared connection and belonging.
I love that sense of belonging. It's often hard for people to put a finger on how to achieve that in organizations. And communities feels like something that we've been doing for thousands of years, and we probably should be good at it. But I get the feeling not so much when it comes to organizations. So what do you see is not going quite so well when it comes to community in our organizations?
Now, look, I think it boils down to we've lost our ability to connect and communicate. Technology is great. We all have the ability to communicate through technology, but it helps us in so many ways, but I do not think it's helping us make meaningful connections. We have connections, right, on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, but the goal is to get followers, right? It's not two-way. It's not communication. It's it's just that one-sided communication. So and people aren't engaging. I really do think we've lost that ability to kind of connect, communicate, especially at work. It all starts with people, right? Every interaction, even the micro interactions, are so important. And I'm pretty not famous for this at work, but what I don't like is like no one talks to each other in the lift. I work in one of the high rises in Auckland, right? So I just say good morning to everybody. I talk, I start conversations, and it makes people really uncomfortable. But, we can do this. We can create our little elevator communities, right? So every opportunity is a chance to create that connection, and that, will spread throughout the organization. So, and, in the world, right, we're more divided than ever. And that's nowhere more true than the US, where I'm from. It's kind of shocking to see. And it's one of the reasons I left, right? It just wasn't the country that I grew up in. And it is an us versus them. And no one is reaching across the aisle anymore. I mean, I remember as a kid growing up in DC, there's a place called Old Ebbitt's Grill. It's this bar. It's 1 block from the White House. And at the end of Congress, those sessions, you'd have the senators and the representatives go to Old Ebbitt's and hang out and have a drink.
Yeah.
Like, it was known for that. And so I went and visited that right before I moved here to New Zealand, and it was a ghost town because it is an us versus them, and that's the antithesis of community. And so I think we need to just start reaching across the aisle, literally, figuratively. We need to understand that there are different points of view. Families are getting divided over politics, and the world, right? But we know now more than ever, if we don't create that sense of community, everything is connected, right? So the social divide, right? It impacts economies, it impacts populations. Everything is interconnected now more than ever. And so it's so important to create those communities and those connections, especially now.
And in some of those things, they apply, on a global scale, at an organizational scale, at a team and family scale, at a, local community scale. They all have those same elements. It sounds like community itself has such a strong play, or a place to play, I should say, in culture. But often culture is talked about as psychological safety, and kind of almost the conversations tend to stop there. It feels like in this conversation we're having, communities play a much bigger and perhaps an easier role for people to start thinking about. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, community is at the heart of culture. It's at the heart of our culture in our lives. It's at the heart of the culture of our organizations. Without community, I don't think you can have a robust, resilient, adaptive culture, because it's all about diversity, right? We talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations, and that means gender and race and religion and sexual preference and all those things. But it's really about diversity of thought. We hire people that are like us. And so it does start there, right?
Yeah.
We need diversity of thought to bring change and innovation and, just question the status quo, because without that, we're just going to become stagnant. So, and here I've noticed, organizations tend to focus on that short-term gain, that's like a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan. And unfortunately, that puts people in the firing line. So look, people, that you need people to create community. And just like we talk about in Agile, right? One of the values is people over process. And that's something, when people ask me what it means to be Agile, I'm like, people over process every time. And now we see this, we do see some companies putting people first. Virgin, right? Richard Branson, he famously says, if your people are happy,
It's
that's
true. Your customers are
everything,
happy.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Exactly. And it was the same at Nike. So at Nike, we had a very clear identity as a Nike employee. Everyone is an athlete. Now, those of you that know me, you know that I'm the least athletic person on the planet, but
Me
at
too.
Nike, I was an athlete. And
Yep.
and I will always be part of that culture. That's the joke. Nike puts the cult in culture, because they put their people first. They make sure that everyone has time for sport, right? I mean, that's what it is. So I think it's really, really important, especially for leaders, right? This does start with leadership, and they need to just come out of their towers and start engaging. I mean, Phil Knight at Nike he had a table in a cafe, one of the many cafes on campus, and anyone could go have a coffee with him.
It sort of links back to what you were saying about the porch culture of, you've got the porch and people hang out and you can go and have a chat, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because what we don't want and I've seen this in many organizations too, is if a leader does come out, like if one of the C-suite execs comes to the different floors, we, what's the first thing you think of? Like, oh, what did we do wrong? There's this
Yeah.
fear, it's intimidating, and, you know, we need to be more curious about that, right? But we need to normalize that behavior. So as leaders, we definitely need to start walking around, getting to know our people. It's not that hard, right? We make it more difficult because we always use time as our constraint. I don't have time for that. But if you prioritize creating that culture, that community, I think that goes so far to creating again, a robust, resilient, adaptive organization that beats out process or system every time, right? When you focus on your people.
And so that idea of leaders taking a bit more of a stance in the role of building a community, because not often on the top of the agenda, there's lots of other things, end of year results and whatnot that might be at the top. Putting that onto their to-do list around building a community in their organization. We've talked a little bit about how they can reach out. Something that you were saying before, though, is everyone having kind of a role in that community, even if it's talking in the elevator, can be exciting too. What's your thoughts around how leaders can help to encourage everyone taking a role in the community, not just on the leaders' shoulders, which obviously they start the process, but is there ways for them to encourage everyone to take part, or any thoughts from that perspective?
Yeah, look, this isn't rocket science, right? It's leading by example. So leadership teams should really work hard to create a strong team one, right? Create that team within itself, that community, and that will trickle down. Look, we know bad behavior trickles down, good behavior trickles down too, right? So we need them to be a community and also be transparent about it, right? So encourage it and encourage the feedback culture. I mean, there's these are just those everyday interactions, walking around, like I said before, just come out of your office and go and walk around. When I go to ANZ, I do bake in time on the days that I'm in the office, and I'll start at level 30 and I will walk down the stairs and I'll walk every floor, because I'm lucky enough in my job that I've been able to interact with a lot of different parts of the organization, and you never know who you're going to see or meet, or and I want to sort of normalize that a little bit. Plus I get my steps in, so that's really, really good. But
It's your inner athlete.
yeah, there we go. I didn't say walking up the steps, I said walking down the steps. But just remembering that every interaction is a chance for connection. It doesn't have to be big, a simple thank you. Leaders, we forget sometimes because we're so busy, we're on to the next thing, right? Thank you. Also, how might we? Is there anything I've missed? Do you have a different perspective? Inviting in the voices, because, and we hear Simon Sinek say, leaders eat last. They should speak last in meetings as well. But that's sort of the more formal things. But just normalizing that you're human. Now we struggle with this a little bit, right? Again, because of time. So at ANZ, I've created something called Tilt, which is totally inspirational leadership talks. It's basically
nice.
They come and sit in the tilt chair, these execs, and it's about 10 to 15 minutes where they tell us a little bit about their life, not their career, pets, bad habits. And then we go into 40 minutes of Ask Me Anything. And that's really where the magic happens, because there's no whole, nothing is off the table. Nothing is scripted. That was the hardest thing for them to get their head around. They wanted the questions in advance. I'm like, no, it's just a conversation.
Yeah, fantastic.
So, yeah. And it's, it works. It's just that it makes them human.
Yeah.
And we need to bring a little humanity back to the office.
Ironically, I think, with the increased people working in a hybrid sense, is having people's background has almost brought us a little bit closer together in some instances, because you're sort of, that you're talking to a real human being. There's their
Yeah,
house or their
yeah,
child or their dog or partner who walks into
exactly.
the room or whatever it is. And so
Yeah,
things become more human just for that moment where people can remember that they're talking to somebody who, we should care about in some
that's
shape
it.
or
I mean,
form.
this is my home.
Yeah.
I'm letting you into my home.
Yeah.
But that's, then we should be setting a little bit of guardrails and ground rules, right? Cameras on. Like
Yeah.
when I run my workshops and meetings, I'm like cameras on, mics on. We're still in that habit of like the webinar where it's the talking head. You can only ask questions in chat. I'm like, come on. So every opportunity, just open it up,
Yeah.
because we always say, what's the worst that could happen? But what's the best that could happen, right?
Great question. What's the best that
We
could happen?
really got to change the way we think about these things.
One of the things that I've seen you do as what I call a community builder is you're very good at connecting people to people. Oh, hey, you should meet such and such. Or I just met with such and such the other day. Maybe that's a great opportunity in connecting people, or organizing an event to catch people up that haven't been together for a while, and all those sorts of things. It's a bit of a gift. It's probably very natural to you. But what's the sort of things that you're thinking about to do that? Because it does take a little bit of effort. So I just thought, what's your sort of thoughts on that? Because I see you do it all the time, and it's just so amazing.
It's funny because I was having this conversation a few weeks ago. It's in my DNA, and I think part of it is growing up the way I did, right? I was part of a very big family. I'm one of 14 children, right? So you kind of get lost in the crowd there. So my dad was a salesman. He was very charming, right? And everywhere we went, everybody knew Johnny, right?
Yeah.
Everybody loved him. And so seeing that as an example, but also when I left that community, when I left my family, I was on my own. So I had to create community wherever I went, because I didn't have that was no longer in my life. So I've always sought it out. Like, and it really is just putting myself out there. I mean, I remember I joined the caving community very soon after I left home. This is like going exploring caves, and I became the membership chairman. And that was my job. Is like when people would show up at meetings wondering what this was, I would go up and I'd be like, hello, welcome, da 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 da. So yeah, I've just kind of always done it, but it's mainly because it satisfies my need for community, right? It's selfish.
Yeah.
And I love when people connect. I love helping people connect. I mean, it is, if you've read Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, I am a
Yep.
connector through and through.
Yeah.
So, but that's how I've also, managed my career and my life. And, it brought me to New Zealand, right? And it helped me, Agile Auckland. That was an amazing way to build up my network and my connections here. So, it's not purely selfless, but I do enjoy it. And yeah, it's just part of my DNA. You just have to try it. Not everyone's receptive. I talk to everybody. I talk to everybody on the street. I talk to the cashiers in the supermarket, because you just never know, right? And you never know who you're going to meet. So it's exciting.
And whose day you're going to brighten as a result.
Well, and my day gets brighter as well.
Yeah.
So win-win.
Do you have a tip for any introverts listening? There'll be some introverts out there going, well, hey, that's good if you've got that in your DNA, but I'm not so good at those kinds of conversations. Is there anything that introverts in an organization can do to help build or solidify a community, do you think?
Look, I think it is hard, and Kiwis are more timid by nature, I think. Um, at work, look, I think it's the leader's job to create those opportunities, right? Everyone speaks first before someone speaks twice, right? And
Yeah.
then in a social situation, put yourself in the middle of the room. Like, no matter what you're doing, don't hang at the wall. right? Just stand in the middle of the room, even if you're by yourself, and see what happens.
Yeah.
Because again, it's people will initiate, right? So you don't always have to initiate, but you've
It's a
got to
good call
bring the
out.
energy that says, I am open to conversation, right? So how you approach it, because if you hang back or put your head down, look at your feet, so there's as much about body language. And I think, we've heard of the Superman pose, right? Just do
Oh
whatever you
yeah.
have to do to kind of build your, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
there's something about that, right? The chemicals. So, and look, I still do that when I'm going into an unknown, right? I build myself up, and I try, but also I feel more comfortable just talking to people, because then it kind of calms me down, which is, I know it's not everybody's thing, but look, introversion is a real thing, and I get it. And it's, again, what's the best that could happen? Not the worst.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool.
I like the tip around you don't have to be the one to make the first move. Just being there can be a massively great start and help support the community, and then others can take the lead from there. In terms of resilience, we were talking in the introduction a little bit around the value of community in building resilience in organizations, and how the strength of community can support from a resilience perspective.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that, and how that could help in these particularly turbulent times?
Yeah. Look, one of the key aspects of community is it's a support network, right?
Yeah.
That is at its heart what it's supposed to be, right? I can rely on you. I'm part of many different communities, and it's in and out, right? Like, I haven't been caving for years, but I could go to any caving community anywhere in the world and be welcome, right?
Yeah.
And that is really, that's a support network, because that's life and death. It's the same thing with diving. But then you go into an organization like, or a community like Burning Man. I'm also a burner for many years, and that's a different kind of connection, right? So the resilience comes from the support network, the strength in numbers, that connection, that trust, uh, and just knowing that you're not alone. And that's, I think,
Mm.
really, really important, because so often, especially, look, I've suffered and survived burnout. I think a lot of us went through different stages of that during COVID, and
Yeah.
and economic downturn and things like that. And you feel so alone. But the community, whether it's at work or in your personal life, right? It's a support system, and so you've got to be able to leverage that. And it goes both ways, right? I know I'm here for whoever needs it. I tell people at work, green means
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
That's my virtual kind of open door. And people use it, and it's great. So it's just, again, as a leader, it's your obligation to kind of create those opportunities, because you're building resilience in your people. You don't want people to suffer alone. You definitely don't want things hidden. We want to start talking about these things that are impacting our employees, because so often we just say, oh, that's just the way it is, or, and we've got to stop burning out our people, right? If it's most of the dysfunction in organizations is about the system or processes, right? But people are impacted the most. So I'd rather break the system than people any day of the week.
Yeah. I liked what you were saying about the strength of the between the connections can really help support in these tougher times. I guess it's a bit like, the neural connections in the brain. The more connections you have, the more you use those connections, the stronger that the brain becomes. And it's a bit like that in these organizations. And it can't hurt to do a little bit more caring day to day in our organizations with each other.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's just about bringing back humanity into the workplace.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hate the word resources. Everybody who's worked with me knows that resources are meant to be used up, and
Yeah.
we've got to stop calling our people resources. Call them anything else.
Yeah.
But that's the language, right? We've got to really start thinking about the language we use day to day as well.
And maybe, from a leadership perspective, that's another great way of looking at our people and organizations as a community, because it changes the lens. If you're going from resources to community, what you do with and how and support of the community is very different to how you use a resource. So that's an
right.
interesting thing. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's say that we've got some leaders out there and they're going, okay, all right, this idea of community and building a community, what could I do tomorrow? Like, what's a simple thing? It's not going to cost me anything. I've got a busy day, so I can't change anything at the last minute, but what could I do tomorrow? What would you say?
Micro interactions. Say
Micro
hello.
interactions? Yeah.
Just say hello
Yeah.
in the lift, wherever you are. Don't, we call it leaving loudly, right? Arrive loudly, leave loudly. Say hello to people. I love a good Gemba walk, right? Just
Yeah.
walk around, not to get status updates. This is really about social connection. What about skip levels? Like talk to the people below your people to see what's really going on. Ask for feedback.
Mm.
Be present. Don't be on your phone when you're having dialogue with somebody. That
Yeah.
drives me up a wall, right?
I hear you. Yeah.
Be on time. That's another
Good
one that
call
drives
out.
me crazy. Respect, right? Because why is your time more valuable than mine? Yes,
Mm.
you have a higher paying job. Yes, you're important, but why am I less important? It really sets the tone. I mean, I think we've got to really start managing our time a little bit better, because showing up on time is respectful, and that's something that, again, I know we're in back-to-back meetings, but I'm a really big fan of on the fives, right? Meetings
Yeah.
end at 5:02 or 10:02, especially in an office building like we work in, right? It takes a minute to get from floor to floor. So schedule meetings for 5 minutes after. Give yourself that time, bake it in. If you can't get it done in 50 minutes, you're not going to get it done in an hour. So make sure that you
Good call out.
schedule that time in, right? Um, Speak last. ask ask those questions like we talked about earlier. What did I miss? Invite it in. Invite
Yeah.
dissent, right? David Marquet loves those dissent cards. You don't need a formal system. Just ask. What could I have done differently? Ask for feedback. Our leaders sort of skip that step, right? They're always talking out and they
Mm.
forget to invite the feedback in. So I know you asked for one thing, but they're all kind of interrelated, right? It's just,
Yeah.
remember, you're dealing with people, not resources. Treat them as humans. We treat our friends better than we treat our colleagues. So yeah, we just need to be mindful of that.
And they're all easy and they all don't take really
No
any
money,
additional time. Walk down the
no money.
stairs instead of, running from meeting to meeting and say hello as you go
Yeah,
past. Such
yeah,
a great easy thing to do. One of the things that you were saying in there is that being on time. And I guess it's a really important aspect of our conversation today, that not everything has to be in the things that we as leaders say, I should say. It's what we
yeah,
can do, and just being on time communicates so much, doesn't it?
yeah.
So yeah, great call out. Thank you for that.
Because
Okay,
think about when they do show up late. How does that make you feel when
absolutely.
you're
Yeah,
sitting there waiting, right? Like
yeah,
I have a 5-minute rule. Like if you're 5 minutes late, I'm ending the meeting. I don't care who you are.
yeah. And that's done.
Yeah.
You talked about a Gemba walk. Can you just explain a Gemba walk for anyone out there who hasn't heard the term before? And if you feel like it, maybe the power pose as well, if you can.
Nice. Look, the Gemba walk is going to the work, right? And it really is having the chats, going to, go to a stand up. If you're running your teams in an agile way, just walk around, ask the teams what's going on. So that really, it's not used as a weapon, right? It's really about that connection, communication. because communicating like this face to face is so much easier than PowerPoints and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's going to the work, create that space. And yeah, I think it's really, really important. Don't ask for updates. Come, the team is already operating in this way, right? They already have their feedback loops. Just show up. You don't need something special, no PowerPoint. You know what I mean? So yeah, so
Exactly.
that's what
Yeah.
it is. And then the PowerPoint, it's really just hands on hips, shoulders back. You stand up, breathe in and out, and just hold your head high. And there's something about the endorphins, or I know
Yeah.
there's a chemical response. I'm just not a scientist. I can't remember, but it works every time. I do know.
Yeah, it was some chemical, I can't remember either, and it's 30 seconds. So
Yeah.
if you're going into a presentation or you're nervous about something, or maybe you're an introvert and you're
Yeah.
going into, you're going to take best, advice, and you're going to walk into the middle of the room at some
Yeah.
sort of community event, and just before you go in, it's a quick pose, 30 seconds, you feel
Yeah.
like a rock star.
It does work every time, I'm
Oh.
giving a talk, I do that, or a workshop. I always do power pose.
Now, speaking of talks, we'll wrap up just on you're doing a talk shortly. Just tell us about the talk that you're doing shortly. I'm not sure when we'll publish this live, so it might be you have to go and find the recording,
Okay.
but tell us about it anyway.
So yeah, I'm speaking at JAFAC in Wellington on May 9th. The conference is May 9th and 10th. I'll be speaking on the morning of May 9th. I just found that out. But my topic is using mafia wisdom to cultivate corporate communities.
Sounds
So look,
very exciting.
I grew up in an Italian family. I don't want to give away the whole farm, but if anyone's seen The Irishman, my grandfather used to drive for Russell Buffalino, so that's what that whole movie's about. That character was not based on my grandfather, because my grandfather drove for him when he was in New York, but yeah, so it's just sort of part of my heritage and my culture, and there's some similarities between the mafia and some corporates. But it's how we leverage kind of that community, because there's nothing deeper than that community, right? It's fascinating, that whole world. So yeah, that's I'm excited for that.
It's going to be an exciting one to hear. Looking forward to. Thank you so much for joining us today, Beth. And we look forward to hearing your JFAC talk when it gets published as well.
Oh, thanks so much, B. I really enjoyed this. So have a good day.
All right. Thank you. Bye
All
now.
right, see ya. Bye.